Hi, Marina.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very good, very good. I miss you and ready to continue our dialogues.
Likewise. Welcome to another conversation around the power of not knowing. And today we are going to dive into the topic of listening. And it is something I think about a lot and focus on a lot because I think we all, but I will speak for myself, am a person that loves listening to people and learning about people and also doesn't feel listened to a lot. And I always think of, why is it so hard for people to listen and to be curious and listen from a place of discovery and curiosity versus a lens of judgment and all of our preconceived past in listening to someone. So maybe I'll just pose the question, why is it so hard for us to listen to another with open hearts?
Whew, that's a big question. And I am actually the one who talks too much. So it's hard for me to listen, and it's more important for me to talk than to listen naturally. So learning how to listen, it's been my life journey. And I'm still on the journey. I'm not an expert in it. But the first possible answer that comes to mind, why is it so difficult to listen? First, because we are rarely present, which means when we are with other people or even alone, we cannot even listen to our hearts because our minds are constantly racing.
Mhm.
And when we are with other people, the first thing that we present, most of us, is a facade. So let's take this physical representation. How can we listen when there is a wall between me and another person? It's much harder. And I'm still within my little world, and another person is saying something. But before we actually can take this wall down, it will be very difficult to listen. And now we need to contemplate what this wall consists of. So the first thing that comes, and please jump in, the first thing that comes to mind, how am I perceived? Am I liked? Am I disliked? Am I perceived as an intelligent person or a dumb person, a beautiful and ugly, and so on and so forth? This is facade number one.
Mhm.
And when we put it down and focus instead of how I am perceived, what I am here to say, and what another person is here to tell. So listening and getting into dialogue versus a monologue, which I am monologuing behind my facade. This is facade number one. When you think about facades, and you nodded, it seems like you agree with me, at least to some extent. So, what facades come to your mind?
Well, just a note on facade number one, something you and someone else, a very wise mentor in my life, has told me throughout the years of, it's not about you. And so often we make it about ourselves. And to your point of the facade of, how am I showing up and how does this person perceive me versus like, what the hell is this person saying? And how can I be there to support them and to listen to them? So uh it's not about you. How, because part of my question was, how do we drop that facade? And I think I answered my own question and just saying, right now is not about me and how I'm perceived, it's about the other person and showing up for the other person. Another facade I think about is just our judgments. So if I
Mhm.
say, you
Mhm.
look like my friend who acts like this, I'm going to listen to you through that lens. Or you live in this city, or you grew up in this town. Those are all thoughts and judgments that I'm bringing to the conversation before probably you even say anything.
I love it, and I totally agree with this. I would divide this second facade, let's call it, into two. And the first one is judgments based on our preconceived ideas, who is important, who is not, how you are dressed, where you are from, are you worthy of my attention and all this kind of stuff, that we have preconceived ideas of who this person is and how they're supposed to be. And another one is protecting ourselves from being attacked, because some people immediately believe that another person will attack them. So judging another person based on the preconceived ideas, but also immediately protecting our, ourselves from them, because they can be potential attacker, they can be potential judger of me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, we can call it two separate facades or two sides of the same facade. It doesn't matter how we call it, but this is what it is. So what else? Let's contemplate what other facades are there that really separate us from other people.
Our own experiences.
Yes.
So I have a vivid memory of when I tore my ACL, and many people, and I was on crutches, so it was very obvious something was wrong. And many people would say what happened, and it was a very unpleasant experience for me. And I would get emotional if I tore my ACL and I can't move and I can't run and I can't do this, I can't ski. And instead of asking me questions or just listening, people would very quickly be like, oh, I did too, or I tore my ACL, or I broke my leg, or I was on crutches for a year. And it was about them and their experiences. So it's, I guess back to the like, it's about how I'm perceived, but it's also about listening to respond, or listening to relate versus letting the person be.
And I completely agree with this. And I found myself on both sides of the table in this scenario. And we first, when someone shares with us their pain, the first inclination for most of us is to save them.
Mm-hmm.
We tell them what to do, or we want to console them by saying, oh, I've been there, I know, I've done this, right? And this is another, maybe not a facade, but a wall. Immediately jumping into the rescuer role is another wall, because a person just needs very often to share and nothing else. They don't need our advice. They don't need our 3 cents. They need a listening ear. And sometimes people actually wholeheartedly want to console by saying, oh, I've been there. It's a shared experience. You're not alone. And in reality, they are just making it all about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So listening without interrupting, it's ideal. Just, I call it holding the space for the person.
Mm-hmm.
And before we can do it, we can need to put all of our facades down. And another facade that I'm thinking about is expectations. If we expect this person behave a certain way, look a certain way, say certain things, and if he or she says different things, it rubs us the wrong way. We get all irritable, and how can you say this? It's completely doesn't fit my picture of the world, or at least my vision of the situation. So we constantly measure other people's behaviors and words against certain standards that we hold. Who created these standards? We created them, but are they relevant? Most often, no. Most often, they're not even relevant to the situation.
Yes.
And putting down expectations as another wall is also absolutely necessary before we can actually hold the space and just be present. Just allowing people to pour their pain or their joy into this space that we are holding. And
I think space makes people uncomfortable. People don't know how to hold space or silence, or I think filling space is more natural than holding space.
I agree completely. And feeling space, I think, our need to feel the space is just to be seen. We want first to be seen and heard and acknowledged, because most likely deep inside, we don't acknowledge and value ourselves. So it goes back into our own lack of the sense of self-worth. And we constantly need for this external confirmation of our importance. And I'm not talking that those people who need to be heard or need to be seen are necessarily these jerks who just pull the blanket of their importance onto themselves or attention to themselves. No, sometimes we all need to be really consoled. We need to be heard. We need to be seen. But the people who do it constantly, this suggests that they themselves don't accept themselves deep inside.
Mm-hmm.
And they also need some space. So it doesn't mean holding space for those, but not holding space. Holding space for the person who is in your presence and with whom you have a conversation. I believe it's an absolutely necessary part of any relationship and any communication.
Yeah. Holding space and not fixing.
Holding space, not fixing, and not showing off. It's not your show. It's your presence.
Mm-hmm.
Show means filling the space. Your presence means holding the space.
Yeah. So if someone were deeply grieving,
Mm-hmm.
I think even me in having this conversation and being aware of the importance of listening would want to say, you're going to be okay, or it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I would want another shot at not saying it's going to be okay, but just saying, what do you need, or what's going on, and being more curious than, I guess that's where I say, than fixing, or than, I don't know if it's going to be okay. Like, I want them to be okay, but it's not. That's my projection, and not allowing them space to have their own experience in it.
Yes, and I believe this is the words when we really want to use words to console someone, and very often there are no words. There are not appropriate words to console someone. So maybe just holding them.
Yeah.
And just listening and listening and listening. And because sometimes when we say for the person who is grieving, oh, I know I've been there, or I know it's hard. No, we don't, because everybody experiences grief in their own ways.
Mm-hmm.
So the less words, but saying, I'm here for you, because this is actually truth. This is a piece of truth that you are here for them. And you say, I hear you. I'm now with you. Yes. Just confirming or again, the less words, the better in these situations. But I would like actually to ask you also about why is it so hard to listen? Because you are actually a listener, and I know that you are very good at it. You've listened to, and because you are a good listener, people actually share the stories with you. It's a puzzle, and the one part really fits another part really well. But from the perspective of a listener, what's hard about listening?
That's a really good question. Um, two things come to mind. I feel people.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times my intuition is ahead of what the person is saying. And I almost know what the person is going to say, or I feel it. And my body and my intuition talk to me sometimes louder than the person that is talking to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this balance of really being present and listening to the person, but also getting a lot of other information from the conversation. And second, I would say, I have a need to be heard and listened to too. And so it's, where is the turn taking? And a lot of times the turn taking doesn't happen.
And thank you for being honest about it and open about it, because balance, I hear the word balance, or the concept of balance. We cannot be listeners all the time. And even as a counselor, I know that I need a pair of listening ears for me.
Mhm.
I am listening. This is my life work and my job. I'm listening to people. And actually, the more experience I get as a therapist, the less I speak, the more I listen.
Mhm.
Uh, and unless people ask more specifically what I recommend, then we brainstorm it. But it's about balance. We all need listening ears, and you cannot be on the listening side all the time.
Yeah.
And actually, for people who are on the talking side most of the time, they need to learn to listen. And people like you, who are more often on the listening side, need to learn to speak your truth.
Yes.
And actually, uh, to those who, when you share something with them and they say, oh, I would do this, this, and this, just honestly saying, could you please not tell me what to do, but just listen, just say, it will be okay. Or something that just shows me that you're listening. You're not suggesting anything immediately. You're not trying to fix anything immediately. So speaking your truth more often is so important.
Mhm. Knowing your truth.
Well, knowing, but you said that you intuitively feel your truth. And by the way, if we train ourselves and we train to listen to our intuition, which may be actually another conversation, is how to listen to your intuition and knowing your truth. We'll talk about it separately, perhaps. But for now, we all know our truth if we listen. If
Mhm.
we, by the way, it's another part of listening. Not only listening to other people's stories and other people's experiences, but also listening to our own hearts, our
Yes.
own feelings. And some people are naturally better at this. They are intuitive, they are feeling. Other people are thinking, 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 thinking. And even those who are thinkers can develop their intuition and then listening to their truth and then communicating it honestly. Because if you sit and hope that another person will guess that you need uh, them just to listen, they will continue pouring their 3 cents or $1 million of ideas what can be done in this situation.
Yes. And the two of us, have run groups and had experiences where sharing and sharing our truths and our reflections or thoughts on other people's stories or experiences is invaluable, um, to everyone, to the entire group. That there is, if it's coming from this place of authenticity and true, I don't know, care, or it's not about me, but it's this reflection about what's happening or what I'm hearing, is really powerful.
It is. And I agree that when we make it not about me, but
Yeah.
about being available to the person, it's very powerful. But another obstacle or another wall that I just thought about, and I'm sorry, by the way, the part on when you were talking, maybe you felt it. When I got this idea, I was not already listening to you. I already was contemplating this idea that I was about to say. And this is, by the way, another big wall
Yeah.
that people are not listening fully. They are already preparing an answer, right? Or preparing their next statement or next great idea, which I'm going to do right now.
Give it to me.
Well, we are living at the time of huge pace. And the science, I mean, scientists, physicists tells us that everything is accelerating, the universe is expanding, and we are moving at a much higher pace nowadays than we used to years ago. And even if I watched an interesting show when they showed people reporting on TV 50 years ago and today. So they are speaking, I don't remember the figure, but
Faster.
times and times faster
Mm.
than they used to 50 years ago. So in each moment of time, we're getting more and more and more information. And the same is happening in personal relationships. We are just so watchful about how much time we give to others that we cannot give our full attention for a long piece of time because we just value our time more than money, I think, very often nowadays. And that is why in that there is a rational seed, if you will. So really choosing your battles and choosing who to communicate with and who not to communicate with. It's also a balance. And very often we cannot be available consistently to everyone, right? We would just not be alive because we would spread ourselves thin. So if you choose to communicate with this person, give yourself full attention, but you have the right not to choose. And the absurdity of this measurement, let me give an example that actually was a very painful example last week. But then when I contemplated on it, I realized how powerful it was. And it's about my daughter, who is your age, which is amazing. And she is doing her own business, and she's a absolutely wonderful photographer and a fashion designer. And she has such a great eye. And I've been helping her in her fashion design business because I used to be a seamstress. So she has this amazing ideas, much better eye than mine, but I know the technology. So I gave so many hours into translating her ideas to the seamstresses who are making the garments. And I was preparing my new website and I did the video. And just the other night, we both were tired. We had a chat on FaceTime, and I asked her, would you mind looking at my video and give me your feedback? It's only 4 minutes. And she immediately said, do I have to listen to all 4 minutes? And it was for me like, what? And my mind, after all the hours that I've given to you, you are refusing to give me this 4 minutes. I said, no, you don't have to. I didn't even send it to her. And I was deeply offended. But then when I contemplated that, I actually thought that she just spoke out something that I often want to speak, but I don't allow myself to speak. She was just honest about it, that each time I'm giving my time, I'm so aware of giving my time, and I'm so greedy in my time. So when I'm doing dishes, I'm constantly watching the clock. How long does it take me to do the dishes? When I'm doing something that I don't really honestly like to do, I'm watching the time. So she just reflected back to me the absurdity of
But
what.
why? I have a question. Why
Yes.
didn't you say, yes, watch all 4 minutes? This is important to me.
Well, because at that moment, actually, this would be my authentic truth. But at that moment, I was so deeply offended and so deeply about me. You offended me, that I couldn't even speak my truth. And instead, I just did what many people do. They ran away. Okay, forget about it. This is exactly defense or a wall that I put. Of course, again, then we talked and we resolved the issue. But the absurdity of this 4 minutes was that she said, no, I don't have this 4 minutes for you. Probably because she was very tired. I was tired and I wouldn't benefit from her feedback that evening. I probably would benefit from her feedback the next day. But what I'm saying is this, yes, I could say this and this would be my truth. But because of my own ego or egocentric defenses at the time, I was offended.
How did you make it up?
I couldn't speak my truth.
Were you able to speak your truth the next day?
Yes, I was. Because again, I just later this day, I was laughing because this is exactly what I do, but I do it in a more kind of, I don't know how to say it, concealed way, that I'm very watchful of my time and I don't give it freely to people. I choose and pick who I give my time to. And it's absurd very often how I count every minute doing the things I don't like to do. I'm not in these minutes, I'm not in the moment. In these minutes when I'm watching time, by the way, another interesting thing, our relationship with time. When time flies and when we're doing what we love to be doing, we don't watch time, we don't feel time. But when we are really serving, not serving, not a good word, doing what we don't like to do. And that is what, yeah, go ahead.
I think you are approaching this in the reflection of protecting our time in what we give our time to, but I also think it's our attention span. Like, even if we're super interested in something, our attention span to listen or to be present is very short, I feel like, these days.
This is another barrier. Attention span is short when we're not interested in the topic. And very often it's very hard for us to listen to other people when we are not interested in the topic.
But even if we are, I think our attention span is short.
That's true too, but it's much longer, I believe, than when we are not interested. So there are so many variables here about listening, about giving our time and giving our full attention. But by the way, another thing that I thought, when other people give us their time unwillingly, so stepping on their throat and giving it just out of obligation or out of not being able to say no, it's not a valuable, valid, it's not a high quality time.
Correct.
I guess she was honest. She was just, at the moment, she didn't have the energy to watch this 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And when I was contemplating this, and we talked about it later, yes, it was an honest response based on the level of energy. It was not culturally appropriate. Telling, like, we will talk maybe about this cultural telling.
According to you.
Exactly. According to my expectations, this is why I said expectations is a huge barrier.
Yeah.
Because I expected her to say, of course, it's just 4 minutes.
Yes.
But she was honest and said, no, do I have to? Right now I laugh about it, but I couldn't laugh about it then. But anyway, going back to this idea of why it's so hard to give our time, and not just time, but our full presence to people.
Yes.
And then it would be more honest to say, no, I don't have time right now. Let's find another time, than saying yes when we mean no. And then giving kind of partial attention or listening but resenting.
Yes.
So it brings us back. How can we be more honest in our relationships? How can we be more saying no when we mean no and saying yes when we mean yes? And being aware of what prevents us from doing this.
You do something that's really helpful for me. You know this, that sometimes I zone out when you're talking because I lose interest, because it's more philosophy and I can't relate it to my life. But and I think you feel that a lot of times, and after you're done talking, you say, what were you thinking when I was saying all of this? Mm-hmm. And it's almost an invitation, and it's easier for me to be like, I zoned out, or like, I can't relate. And I don't know, the word curiosity keeps coming into my mind in this conversation of, you have this beautiful way of giving me an invitation to give you feedback or to say what I'm thinking, that I don't think a lot of other relationships in my life don't do that. You're very conscious at it, but yeah, I think asking a question versus stating a comment is maybe even a softer way of getting information or feedback from someone around the context of listening in time and space.
That's true. Asking questions is a beautiful, beautiful way of listening, because you may actually become interested by asking questions. For example, you gave an example of a grieving person. Tell me about the person who you lost, or whatever you are grieving, whoever you are grieving. Tell me the fun moments. Tell me the sad moments. So asking the questions that actually would allow this person to speak, but also reflect your sincere interest.
Mhm.
So when we lose interest but still would like to hold the space, I think it would be much honest to ask a question
Yes.
than to keep listening with one ear or to be half present, because we're all human beings. And I think it's a great observation that you made, that our attention span is very short and we lose interest. And I know it immediately because I work with hundreds and hundreds of people. When I lose this connection,
Mhm.
I notice it the second, because people's eyes become glowing and they're not there anymore. I think we all know it. We all experienced it, right?
Yes.
We all know when another person is not connected with us anymore. He or
Mhm.
she is not listening, or they're thinking about their other things. We know it, we feel it. And what to do in these moments? Um, yeah, asking questions or stop talking.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. Or just saying, I have a friend that I can hear her type every time I talk to her. And I kind of just want to be like, call me when you're free. Like being able to kind of set the scene of what you need
Mhm.
versus tolerate not being listened to just be like, hey, I can tell you're not here. This is important. Call me when you have some time or whatever, to be able to, we're so afraid to call it out too.
Mhm. It's so interesting that you brought it up, because I have a cultural piece that was a shock for me in this country. That for example, when I went back to graduate school here, the University of Denver, and people ate when they listened to professors. For me, it was what? What are you? It's almost like I didn't have words. I didn't have experience. How can you eat when you're listening to a presentation? And then I realized that Americans do everything eating. They have business meeting eating. It became kind of a piece of cultural acculturation, I would say. But I still am rubbed the wrong way when we have a conversation, unless it's around the dinner table or cocktail or something. If someone talks with me on the phone and eats, so typing is your trigger, and eating,
Anything not being present is my trigger.
well, and eating is my trigger.
Yes. Yeah. So for those listening, uh what is, I think, some takeaways like curiosity and being curious and listening to um, learn and understand. I think it's also important to acknowledge everyone's need to be heard and to listen to, and our responsibility in that. Um, and the whole piece of like, it's not about us, and how to begin to drop our facades.
Yes, yes. Dropping our facades, acknowledging that everybody needs a listening ear,
Mhm.
and also not being so um, greedy of our time, picking out people we are communicating with. It's true, it's inevitable, but at the same time, um, not picking the people. This is not true. Picking the time when we are available.
Mhm.
So really being respectful to our bodies. So when we are tired, we cannot be a listening ear unless it's an emergency. Or when other people are tired, we cannot expect them to be a listening ear. So being more in tune with our bodies and with other people's energies. I believe this is another important element. And mm, also developing a new skill of listening.
Mhm.
And yes, you will space out in the moment for a moment. It's only our human nature, but then you come back into listening. And this is a skill that I believe needs to be learned. And yes, it's easier for some people. So for you, it's a balance of between listening and saying, I need a listening ear too. Or for other people like me who needs to stop talking and listening more. And this really did, I developed this skill. I know I didn't have it. I didn't have it. It was my one of my battles. I wouldn't say won battles. I haven't won it, but I'm still on a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think to the power of not knowing, of it's okay to say I don't know what to say, of the idea of we all need to fill space and we all have to have a response immediately after someone stops talking, is a lot of pressure versus just either allowing space and being comfortable in a moment of silence, or saying I don't know what to say, I've never heard something like this, or I've never been in this
beautiful.
situation.
Beautiful. I completely agree with this. And also sometimes when people, this is what I deal with, when people are grieving or people judging themselves very harshly, they would say, oh, it happened to me because I did this and this. I wasn't good there and there. So when people lose someone, they usually tend to judge themselves very harshly and think what they did wrong and how could they prevent this. And in the moments like this, just telling them, you don't know why this happened. We really don't know why things happen the way they happen. It's a great mystery of life. Um, it's, a, it's this life's central unpredictability and uncertainty. I believe saying something like this may be healing. You just say, no, it's not necessarily your fault. I mean, there are so many variables that play into it. We don't know why things. So openly saying we don't know may be healing for people.
It takes the pressure off of needing to understand or figure it
Yeah,
out, because
yeah.
we don't know. We don't know.
Or harshly judge ourselves or others,
Yes.
or needing to fix everything, because giving advice is actually knowing or thinking that you know, right? And who knows, if this worked for you, it doesn't necessarily will work for another person, because well, because we're all unique and every experience is absolutely um, individual and unprecedented.
Mhm.
Well, so listening, there is something in this skill and our human ability. We give this beautiful ability to speak our truth. We're given language. But I believe our language would become even more powerful and healing if we use space between words, if we use space between speaking and not speaking, if we use silence, which is a much more powerful healer, I believe. Presence and silence, space between the words.
Yeah.
And I believe we all need to, still a long way to go until we embrace the silence and start using it more um, often and more freely, more wholeheartedly, and more efficiently.
Yes. So powerful. And space to I don't know, the like allow ourselves not to need to defend even, and there's so many conflicts and tension in the world even right now, and I feel like a lot of conversations aren't rooted in listening but rooted in defending different sides and different opinions and points of view. And there's something really powerful in using all of the things that we've talked about in this conversation, of listening to be curious and understand and allow space versus uh you know, I'm right, you're wrong, I believe this, you don't.
Yeah, proving your point, proving each other's, like proving my point is one of these barriers. One thing is speaking your truth, and another speak is proving the point. The energy is completely different behind it.
Yeah.
And proving it means telling I'm right and you're wrong. And speaking your truth, it's just how I see it, but I give you all the freedom to see it in your own way,
Mhm.
because I don't know what is absolutely true. I just have a perspective. So treating our knowledge as perspectives, opinions, pieces of information, but not the absolute truth, I believe is also a very important variable in this equation.
Yeah. Yes. My last thought is listening to our bodies as well. Before we started recording today, we had a conversation around my knee and it hurting. And we were having a conversation about other things that were happening in my life. And my knee was talking to me in other ways other than just pain. And I think that is something else we in the learning to listen to ourselves, learning to listen to our bodies, and learning to listen to other people's bodies and body language, and the physical listening is also super important.
And my final point, which I completely agree, listening to your body and also listening to your heart.
Yeah.
And when we listen to other people, listening with an open heart. I hope we will continue talking about opening our heart, what it means, what it entails. For now, it's just presence, being fully there, but being fully there, completely open, with no preconceived notions, with no agenda, with nothing to prove. This, I believe, kind of a first sign of being there and listening with your open heart.
Beautiful. Beautiful way to end. Do you have any other parting words or?
Yes. Thank you so much for having these dialogues, and it's just such a beautiful opportunity to exchange our perspectives, ideas, and also inviting people to share their stories with us and joining us, and we are very open into listening.
Yes. Well, I can say when you talk, you have a lot of wisdom, but you also have taught yourself to listen with an open heart and have taught me that. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you. Have a great day, everyone, and join us next week. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being with us.